What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. Frank Macaluso here from Garageaholic, giving you another episode of the E31 S85 swap. Today we're going to be doing the rod bearings on the S85. As you can see, I have it on a stand, which makes it a little bit more convenient to do than most of you will end up doing with the engine in the car, but I want to show you for illustration purposes how to do it effectively with all the right tools. I would like to thank our sponsor, Empower Motorsports, for providing not only the BE bearings, but also the ARP 2000 studs. We're going to go through the materials used, the tools that are required, and exactly how to go about replacing all of your rod bearings in your S85. So this episode is going to focus on the rod bearings for the S85 engine, but it also applies to the S65, which is the V8 version found in the E90, E92 M3s. So yes, there are a lot of videos out there for replacing S85 rod bearings in your car. But this video, I want it to be as succinct and direct as possible, show you what you need to know to do the job right. So what you see before you is all of the equipment and tools necessary in order to replace your bearings on your S85. I have 10 top bearings, I have 10 bottom bearings. I have all of my studs that are going to be replaced, the bolts rather, they're going to be replaced. I have my Lucas Oil assembly lube. I have my snap-on torque wrench, which is torquing all of these to 50 foot-pounds. I have my 10 millimeter, and I have my 12 millimeter 12-point socket, and of course, 3/8 inch extension. I've labeled all 10 of my cylinders so that I know exactly which ones come off of which cylinder so that I can identify if I have a problem area in any particular cylinder. We'll install these guys one by one. I'll show you exactly how to do it. But these are really high quality BE bearings, which there's a number of different bearings out there, but these are known in the enthusiast community as being the most reputable and long lasting. And as far as the studs go, these are ARP 2000 studs, they're called. And these are a torque to 50 foot-pounds and done. So these are really, really important. These are not the type that you torque and then turn 90 degrees and then torque another 90 degrees. It's not like that. These are non-stretch. Well, they stretch, but not to the factory standard that you're used to for all other BMW OEM parts. So these are really, really good, high quality studs, bolts rather, and these are awesome bearings that I cannot wait to install. A really good torque wrench is important to ensure that you have the exact same torque value for all of your studs. Especially, per cylinder. It's very important that you have the exact same torque value. So you can easily set this to whatever digital value you want and then torque that way. And the assembly lube is really important because that is actually what goes on before you actually install any of your bearings. And that's important because when you first start your engine and you don't have that lube in there, you can have metal on metal wear. And the assembly lube actually allows that, prevents that metal on metal wear by allowing that lubricant surface to first make the contact before, and then obviously the oil then seeps in. So let's get right into it and start removing. Let's start removing the oil pickup and get access to these lower bolts. In order to turn the crank, use a 32 millimeter deep socket with a 1/2 inch ratchet. Doesn't take much energy to turn it over, but you want to minimize the amount that you're turning because there's no oil flowing, and that really doesn't help when you're trying to access every single one of your 10 cylinders. So what we do is apply the strategy of whatever one is exposed at the time, we remove. And over time of turning it 1/2, 1/4, 1/8 of the way, you're exposing a new cylinder. So you might not be doing them all consecutively, but you're doing it all with minimizing the amount of turns you have to make without having oil being circulated. So the way that it's turned right now, everything is facing the way it should be facing. This one is obviously the easiest one to access. We can access this guy. We can probably access from the other side. This guy and this guy without ever having to turn the crank. And how will you know which cylinder you've done and which one you haven't done? Because the bolt heads are starkly different. The stock is actually a 12 millimeter 12-point socket, and the ARP 2000 is a 10 millimeter 12-point socket. So you'll know exactly which one you've done by virtue of looking at the bolt heads alone. So now we're just going to slow down just a bit, and we're going to remove the first stud No time lapses, no music. Just remove it. And no power tools. Everything is all hand tools here. Okay, there's the first. We'll call this one cylinder 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Another reason to do one at a time is because each one of these caps is made specifically for this connecting rod. And that's because there is let's pull that guy out. There's the bearing. Each one of these guys has a marking on it. That's 710. And you can see that the casting is actually looks like it's broken. And it's so important that you match the casting up. It's like a puzzle piece that fits exactly where it needs to go. And that allows perfect centricity from the cap to the connecting rod. So it's also, let me see, is this that's 710, that goes there, right? That does not have a marking on it at all. So that doesn't have the marking. That does have a marking, 710. So there is a marking right in here. It's hard to see, but there is a marking 710 on that side. So the 710 matches up with the 710. And that's the way it needs to go. So I removed the cap, and you can see that the actual bearing comes out really easily. And I want to mark just to make sure that this side here goes back to that side and not the other side. Like I said, it's a puzzle piece that needs to be exactly the way that it should be. So I have lower and upper labeled right here. We're dealing with cylinder 10. Now we're on 10, and we got our lower. So now we can take it off. And you can see that you really can't mess up the installation of this because you can see that the nub on the actual on the cap matches the nub on the actual bearing there. So this has to go in one direction, has to go like that, so that the nub fits inside of the cap. So we're going to take that guy and set it right there. Just looking at it, it looks pretty good actually. It doesn't look like there's a lot of wear. It looks like there's a little bit, but it doesn't look. I don't see any copper on there. That's something you normally see. So let's take a look at the top and push that connecting rod down and get that top out. Okay, so let me set this here. So to get the top out, you basically need to just push the piston down, and you should be able to gotta be really careful not to scratch the journal surface as you're removing this. So let me get a tool. All right, so taking a look at the bearings, we have our lowers, which don't really look that bad at all. That's not really the one you should be concerned with. It's usually the uppers that you should be concerned with. And there you go. You can see that copper wear on that edge. And why do the uppers wear more than the lowers? Well, if you think about it, you have an engine with a piston that's basically firing. And it fires, well, actually it's upside down, but it fires like that. And that forces the connecting rod to be pushed up against into the crankshaft. And that pushing every single time is causing the wear. So it's not really the bottom side that's experiencing the turnaround on the crank. It's the top side of the crank that's actually experiencing the increased push. So that's why the top actually wears more predominantly than the bottoms. And we'll probably find that on every single one of these as we go through them. But I'm only going to do a couple of these for you and then explain to you how it was at the very end, and we can evaluate. And we have our lower new bearing, which is going to get installed into the lower cap. You can see that the notch here matches the notch here, and you install it just like that. But before we do, we need to apply the assembly lube. Apply the lube. Right? Get it all in there, just like that. Top two. And then the way you install these is you line up the notches, just like this. Line up the notches nice and even and level, right? Just like that. And then you push down. Now it's not going to fit 100% just like that until you push it all the way down, just like that. And you'll see that it may or may not be exactly the same, and you can always rotate it a little bit, but it is basically ready for install. Because what's going to happen is as you clamp both of these bolts down, this will end up evening itself out and teetering on itself. So now this is basically ready for install. Let's also get the upper piece installed as well. Here's the top. So let's get this guy installed. Just like that. This stuff is really gooey. So the notch here lines up with the notch there. You can see it right down there. And you kind of want to just rotate it around, and it should kind of just clip right in like that. And then notch there. And then you just push it from the other side. There we go. Hard to see, but this is seated in now. Let me get a better view for you. See down there, you can see right there that it's clipped in. And right here, it's also clipped in. And now we can basically pull this back into place. There we go. There we go, just like that. Okay. This tool worked out really well. Grabs it from behind and pulls it back up. For you, if you're doing this in your car, while the engine's in the car, you really probably won't need to worry about that because you'll have gravity on your side. Remember, the marking for 710 is over here. It just slips right on top. And then, just as important as the assembly lube is on the actual bearings themselves when installing is the importance of assembly lube on the actual ARP bolts. This is part number 100-9909, and this is an assembly lube that goes on the actual bolts themselves before you torque them down. This allows and ensures that you have exactly the same amount of torque on every single one of these bolts, because having both of those bolts mated to each other, having the exact same torque is very, very important to equalize the pressure and the force applied to the journal on the connecting rod. To apply it very easily, all you do, you put a little bit on the head, a little bit of lube on the head, and a little bit of lube on the threads, right? Swish it around with your finger on all around the sides. Okay. Now this guy is ready for installation.
Always want to start your bolts by hand and then finish up with the torque wrench later, and always set to
50 foot-pounds. Now, as it's acceptable, the shortest amount of extensions that you use, the better, because the extensions actually absorb a lot of the torque. As it twists, the longer, the worse, and the less accurate your torque value is going to be.
And anytime you're torquing something, especially the 50 foot-pounds, you want to creep up to that torque value really slowly. Always go slow until you hit that level. When applying the assembly lube, you want to put it really nice and generous on the inside of the bearing, and then use your finger to kind of smush it around and get it on the front, and get on the tops, and on the corner edges as well. And of course, don't forget your assembly lube for the bolts. Now line up the notch on the bearing with the notch on the cap, and you should put a little bit of moderate force and click it right in, and you should feel a really nice satisfying click. Then you got to put the cap right on and hand tighten those bolts.
And that just about does it for all 10 cylinders. As far as rotating the engine, in order to get access, only about a quarter of the way each way, like from here to there and then back a couple times, no big deal, just to get access to the top by removing the connecting rod and moving it over to the side, rotating the crankshaft a little bit, and that gives me the access I need to get that bearing out really easily. Let's take a look at the bearings themselves. The lowers all looked pretty good in terms of wear, no copper showing on the lowers. The uppers did have 3 or 4 cylinders, cylinder 2, 5, and 9. Looks like 9 has some copper, and so does 10. Other than that, not nearly as bad as what I've seen from other people who've removed their bearings and taken them out, and I'm so glad that they did. I'm very glad that I did too, but not really as bad as I've seen. Thank you so much to M-Power Motorsports for providing BE bearings and ARP 2000 rod bolts. When in a time where so many people were selling out of them, you had them. Thank you so much for everything you've done for me, helping me out, providing me what I needed when I needed it. Thank you so much. Guys, take it easy. My name is Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic. I'm out of here. Later.